let's fix some of the less good Gen 9 designs. Hey all you nerds, Gabe, aka Froopy Art here, and if you're like me, you probably found at least a couple of the Generation 9 designs a little disappointing. On the whole, great designs, but I want to try my hand at redoing some of my least favorites. First up is one I don't think anyone will be surprised by, and that is Flamigo. You know, the one that's just basically a flamingo. I mean, the name is great, but beyond that, it's just a bird. They put a knot in the neck, and I suppose that the body vaguely looks like a boxing glove, kind of, but even that is a stretch. There is very little here to give it personality, and it certainly doesn't do enough to justify the fighting type. Right now, this should be a mono flying type, or even worse, the dreaded normal flying. So, what can we do about it? This was my first of the redesigns, so on the whole, I didn't want to change too much. The overall body shape will remain the same, with a few minor tweaks. Knobby ankles, a tail, more prominent wing feathers, and an expression with some more personality. So the major change is going to come from the pose. I wanted to justify the fighting type without adding, like a bandana or leg wraps or anything too obvious. So we're going to bring in some influences from the Brazilian dance martial art, capoeira. One of the coolest things about capoeira are the acrobatic turns and flips that often involve balancing and spinning on one limb, and hey, flamingos are also known for standing on one limb, so that's a fun connection. But what do you think? We've got a flamingo that would be spinning and flipping and kicking your butt. The name could stay Flamigo since, that's just a great name, or it could change to something silly like Flapuera. Flapuera, yeah, that's good. Okay, but before we get to the next redesign, I want to do a quick dishonorable mention to the Pommy line. Ah, the Pommy line. You're so stinking cute, just adorable, but there are so few changes that you just come off as pointless. All right, there is a relatively simple fix here. Just toss out that middle stage. Just let this be a two-stage design. Everyone, including Pommy, would be happier. All right, for the next redesign, we're taking a look at Spidops. And here's the thing. I honestly don't consider Spidops to be a bad design. I can see where the ogre spider and weaving influences are, but something just falls a little flat for me. Maybe it's just a hair too humanoid looking, or it also is maybe a little too green, so that in conjunction with the mouth pattern, it makes me always think that it could be a grass type instead, so let's just give it a little more oomph. Ogre spiders have these wonderfully elongated abdomens, which the original design brilliantly turned into a spool of thread, but we're going to exaggerate that a little bit further. So now it will simply balance on its butt. This also starts to tweak the personality. It'll be a bit more reserved and focused on its work. The other big change is how the limbs work. I actually went more closely with how ogre spiders actually position their legs, so now the arms are 3 limbs together, which can be spread apart to hold web nets. This tripod nature is just a bit more interesting. Oh, and lastly, I tweaked the green just a hair to get away from the grass type connections. This isn't ridiculously different from the original design and could certainly stay named Spidops, but I don't know. If you can think of a better name for this update, let me know down in the comments. But I gotta say, I really like how this turned out. Just that little bit of thread gives it some much needed movement and flair. Alright, I want to do another dishonorable mention, and I know that very few people will agree with me on this one, but I was so disappointed by Skeledirge. It's a lot of little things for me. All right, too many sharp angles, something about the head feels unfinished, but more than anything, it just doesn't feel like it is utilizing the Dia de Muertos influences. I'm not going to redesign it since I kind of already did when I made a primal form back in the Paleon decks, But yeah, I just want it to match the inspiration better. But for the next redesign, we're going to be tackling a 2-stage line. Oh man, Capsakid and Scovillain. Talk about disappointing. All right, we've all been clamoring for a chili pepper, grass fire Pokemon for years. This though is not what I was hoping for. Looking at Capsakid first, I know I'm a little biased since this thing is just really tough to spot in game, and it got really annoying to keep accidentally running into these things, but also just looking at this kind of makes me uncomfortable. I think it's the baby doll look, the dead hollow eyes, and man, oh man, do I absolutely hate the flower cap bonnet. I get what they're doing, right, with this being a reference to the flowers that grow on chili plants, but this may be my least favorite design from the whole generation. So how do we fix it? Well, I feel like it needs a little more inspiration than just saying like, I'm a mean little baby pepper flower. So looking ahead, I wanted to play up the happy and sad peppers as the comedy and tragedy drama masks. So our little baby will be nice and dramatic. At the end of the day, I am still a theater kid at heart, so I couldn't resist. All right, by playing with the flower petals, the head becomes a Hamlet-esque Yorick skull, and the rest of the flower kind of flows as a frilly Shakespearean shirt. Now, I know that the skull imagery feels very ghost-typey, but I think this could stay monograss, but now it just gets access to some ghost moves. This is the personality that I want Capsakid to have, alright? This overly dramatic little pepper flower is just so much more interesting than an annoying, angry baby. This is definitely the biggest departure from the original, but I'm a fan. But what do we do with Scovillain? I mean, I didn't think I could be this disappointed with a pepper design. Of everything we've seen, this feels the least inspired. I mean, I get it that it has 2 differently colored heads to reference the big batches that chilies grow in and the, various spice level possibilities. Right, and I do appreciate that it is a fire type that doesn't incorporate any actual flames. But other than that, yikes. This design feels very unbalanced, the proportions aren't doing it for me, and the green head just blends in too much with the rest of the design. Also, I'm not a fan of the empty eyes. Okay, so what do? I ended up doing 2 passes at this. I knew that we would be keeping the 2 peppers and treating them as the comedy and tragedy masks, but this first design was just not different enough. It's actually kind of terrible, so I knew that when I redid things, I needed to really lean into the theatrical influences and not be afraid to diverge from the original design. So, keeping the 2 peppers was the only major requirement, and then in order to continue with the Shakespearean influences, I kept some of the white petals. This allows us to have a simple false head and a very Shakespearean-looking neck ruffle. And the twisting vines as legs feels like a dramatic pose, and that's just so much better than the chunky legs of the original. Oh, and no more green head. Orange instead, just to allow it to pop a little bit more. Okay, it is certainly different, but I prefer it. Again, I'm a theater nerd, and I drew it, so I am biased, but let me know what you think of these 2. Are they too different from the originals? I feel like they would need a new name as well. Let me know if you have any suggestions. Okay, let's do a quick 3rd dishonorable mention. Espathra. I know I am in the minority here, but I am not a huge fan. But the tweaks that I would want to make are minor, and that didn't warrant a full redesign. Firstly, it's not a huge issue, but I'm not digging the hair. It feels a little too humanoid. But the big issue is the color palette. I'm not sure what it is, but I hate this color palette so much. I find it very unappealing. If anyone agrees with that, please let me know. Okay. One final redesign to do, Baxcalibur. Woof. Right now, this is hands down my least favorite pseudo-legendary. This thing is ugly. The upright posture, the weird snout, the red claw doodads. There's so much that just isn't working for me. Now, I know that they were going for like a Godzilla look, and you can see how some people might want that, but we've already got Tyranitar, right? Don't do that here. And it's a shame because I kind of enjoy how ugly adorable the first stage is, and Arctibax is a super solid middle stage, but Excalibur is just, it's just awful. It's awful. Let's fix that. First off, we are tossing the Godzilla pose out the window and leaning into what I feel like is the more interesting inspiration. All right, with the small sail, the arm quills, and being in Spain, this is 100% a Concavenator. And you know I can't resist me some dinosaur influences, so Icy Dino it is. The other bit that I wanted to play up was the Excalibur swordiness. It's a little tough to see with the pose that I chose, but I added a little ice sail on the belly too, so that means in profile, this design is roughly shaped like a sword. The head and snout are the pommel, the neck is the grip, the back and belly sails become the crossguard, and the tail is, of course, the blade. And just like that, we've got a new appealing pseudo-legendary, which I think can definitely keep the name Excalibur. But you'll have to let me know what you think of all of these redesigns. Which is your favorite? Would you change anything else, or do you prefer the originals? Are there any other Gen 9 designs you wish were different? And I don't know, do you think I should do this with any of the other generations? Let's commiserate down in the comments. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one. Later, nerds.